Tonight on First Tuesday.
They treat the physical bit of your body that's being chopped off then and there. And then you're away from them. And there's a whole other part of you that doesn't get helped or treated at all.
A forgotten chapter in the cancer story. And the young Cambodian refugee who's tasting life in an English comprehensive.
Yes, it's probably better than Cambodia under Pol Pot, but I feel it's really important for them to understand that it's not going to be a picnic when they get there.
Good evening and welcome to First Tuesday. There was a time when to be told one had cancer was almost to be given a death sentence. Medical advances have changed much of that. But the treatment required to halt a killer disease is itself an assault on one's system. Cancer patients shocked by the initial diagnosis are distressed and often depressed by the after effects of unpleasant treatment, and they complain that they're left to cope with all this on their own. They say doctors often don't recognise the need for emotional support. They say high-tech medicine has forgotten about simple care. It's a story they tell in our first film tonight, A Quiet Scream.
This is the high-technology face of cancer treatment in Britain today. 1 person in 3 will get cancer at some time in their life. Very few families have not been touched by the disease. Although medical science has made great advances in the treatment of cancer, there's one forgotten issue, the emotional consequences for the patient.
I just was really, really frightened. I just could physically feel, it felt as though the life was draining out of me slowly when he told me. And I just thought I was going to die.
My consultant came back in and said that the surgeon felt the lump had gone too far and was too big and that I had to have another mastectomy. And I was devastated.
As things got worse, I definitely needed some sort of way of releasing energy, of talking it out. Not the disease itself, but the way I felt. And then I ran into problems because there was nothing. There was just nothing there. The doctors are too busy, the nurses are too busy.
Research spending on cancer is a staggering £90 million a year. Yet the Health Service has provided virtually no funding for research into the emotional effects of cancer and its treatment. This has been left to the cancer charities.
I think the high-tech equipment's invaluable. I mean, the advent of equipment like the CAT scanner, the computerised tomography, that's invaluable. But I think we need to make the balance between psychological needs and research needs and modern technology. We actually have to remember that the patient and their emotional needs are perhaps at the centre of all of that.
It does represent a very serious gap that exists in quite a number of parts of Great Britain. I think the problem is that the provision of counselling and support is far too patchy at the moment.
Lancaster is the only place in Britain where the resources of the Health Service and volunteers have been drawn together to support cancer patients through every aspect of the illness, from diagnosis and treatment through to advice and therapy.
Just let yourself really, really relax. That's good. So that now, just allowing that feeling of calmness and of relaxation to flow through you.
And just to steady ourselves, we're going to count our breaths in 4s. counting an in and an out breath as one breath.
Okay. All right.
This service, called Cancer Care, was set up by Dr. Malcolm McElmurray, a cancer physician, who realised that his patients were not getting the emotional support they needed.
I started up a hospital-based cancer diagnostic and treatment clinic, and I very quickly discovered that what was being said in the clinic, what was happening to the patients when they got home, were often went unnoticed by the hospital staff and myself. That I would appreciate often some weeks later that when the patient had gone home, there'd been a good deal of distress, of misunderstanding often about what had been said.
But for the 250,000 cancer sufferers diagnosed each year, these problems mostly go unrecognised by the professionals. 23-year-old Gary Hurley has leukemia. Although he lives in Blackpool, only 35 miles from Lancaster, he has to cope alone with his illness. This is because Blackpool is in a different health area, one which, like many others in Britain, has no specialist cancer physician, nor even a support group.
It's very difficult to communicate what I feel and what I've felt and what I've been through. And also, I'm physically isolated by my physical condition. I can't go out to the places where you would meet people, pubs, clubs, because I'm just not physically strong enough to be there for any length of time. And I can't seem to find any point of contact with the outside world, which I really miss and which I feel I really need.
The first hurdle for any cancer victim comes when they're told the bad news. Right from the start, Gary found that doctors seemed unwilling to tell him about his illness. They found it difficult to discuss the problems or even use the word cancer.
Backing off from my questions and not really volunteering anything themselves until they finally said, it's lymphoma. And then telling me virtually nothing. They said, have you heard of Hodgkin's disease? I said, yes. They said, it's very similar. That was as far as they went. He described it that it could be described not even as being a cancer.
Morning, Gary. How's your breakfast, love?
I'm not sure whether they thought I couldn't handle it, or
I'll put your drinks over here.
maybe my parents, because they told us all together.
No
But
today.
I felt the doctor himself, he was very, very uneasy when he came to tell us. He tried to get in and out as quickly as he could and leave us alone.
Ros Turner-Nash in London had to have both breasts removed. She, like Gary, feels her doctors found it difficult to talk to her.
Nobody before in the hospital had ever mentioned the word cancer. They talked about an unidentified mass or an unidentified area. And so if you don't talk about having cancer, you can't actually come to terms with the fact that nobody uses the word that you've actually got it. They're all very busy. And I believe they try. But they treat the physical bit of your body that's being chopped off then and there. And then you're away from them. And there's a whole other part of you that doesn't get helped or treated at all. Your emotions, the effect it has on your family, all of that you have to go home and cope with somehow by yourself.
Professionals can find it very difficult because giving bad news, if it is bad news, is not very easy because you have to look at the anguish on the person's face that you've just given the news to. You have to hear them talk about perhaps the horrendous implications of the bad news for their lives. It might mean that some very important plans now have to be abandoned. So it is hard to give bad news, and the problem then is that the professional may in fact try and avoid it and give only half the truth, or use euphemisms like, well, it's a few funny cells, or it could be a sort of growth, or it isn't a growth yet, but we'll take it out just to be sure.
They've never been taught to do it. They don't know how to do it. And they learn very often by experience. And they watch their role model, which is often their consultant. And they, in turn, probably weren't taught either. So they're repeatedly picking up bad habits. It's not. I'm sure it's not in many medical schools. It's not a topic in the curriculum.
After the initial shock of the diagnosis comes the fear of treatment. A study by the Cancer Research Campaign has found that patients are frightened and vulnerable and need more help to cope with the treatment, which may involve the use of surgery, radiation or drugs. It's a grueling regime that can last for many months, and patients sometimes say the side effects of treatment are worse than the disease itself. It's a time when a patient needs information and reassurance, help which is not always available.
I was offered the choice between different types of operation, and I could either have a simple or a partial mastectomy. And I was told to go away and think about it and come back. And I went away for a couple of days to think about it, and I realised it wasn't such a progressive suggestion after all, because I had no medical basis on which to decide what kind of operation I ought to have. And then I got terribly, terribly angry. I couldn't believe that with all the money they spend on defence and people going to the moon and all the rest of it, that the best they could offer women was just to mutilate us and chop us up. And I suppose I've always felt very angry about that ever since. The lowest times are waiting for the operation. Both times have been the most desperate and the most frightening times for me has been waiting for the operations. And they've been the most difficult few days to get through. When I have what I call the horrors, it came for about 2 or 3 weeks after my second operation. And I would always get it round about midnight. And I would be lying in bed. And suddenly I'd start crying. But I wouldn't be making a noise. And it's very strange to feel these hot tears coming down, going all over you. But you're not making any kind of noise. And inside I would feel as though I was screaming. But again, I wouldn't actually be screaming. It would be a kind of quiet scream. And because I have such a good husband, he was sensible enough to talk me through it and let me get it out of my system. But sometimes it took maybe 2 or 3 hours to get it out of my system, and then I could go to sleep.
Patients also need help to get through chemotherapy, the injection of powerful anti-cancer drugs.
It's a simple injection. It's an anticlimax at the time, but depending on the drug, usually within the first half hour, you begin to feel very nauseous, very tired, irritable, headaches perhaps, aches in the bones, and this can continue for a number of days, and it gets worse. You just stop eating, you stop drinking, which is the worst thing you can do. Mentally, it just flattens you, and because it's a cycle, usually most stages are you're given a dose once a week. It gets worse as it goes on. Your resistance is lower after each dose, so the next dose hits you harder. And it's that horrible repetition. No matter how bad an operation is, and you may dread it, once it's over, you know you're on your way to recovery. The chemotherapy seems like it's never ending. It's just one after another, and you know what's going to happen each time.
In April last year, Tricia Holland was told that she had Hodgkin's disease, a cancer of the lymph glands. She was due to have 16 sessions of chemotherapy, but after the first 6, she wanted to give up.
I just felt that I couldn't carry on, couldn't have it anymore, because it was just too horrible. It was the fear and dread of going there to the hospital, and everything became frightening, like the needle going in, and the feeling, I could feel the drugs going up my arm, and it was sort of like a cold feeling, which may have just been because they were in the fridge, in fact. But this all seemed frightening, and the smell and taste, I'd get a horrible taste at the back of my throat. And even the place and the people appeared threatening.
For many patients, the distress caused by chemotherapy is made even worse because they have to travel long distances to get the treatment. This is because Britain has few cancer specialists. Most are in the big regional hospitals.
We have in total, I think, something like 50 cancer physicians in this country. And if you compare that with somewhere like the States, where there are 4,000, it probably means that we have as many as there are in New York. And I think once you have specialist centres like that, then you will get specialist teams. But that, of course, all relates to resources and priorities.
Typical of a town its size, Blackpool has 1,200 cancers a year, but no specialist cancer physician. Gary had to make a round trip of 100 miles to Manchester each time he needed his chemotherapy.
It was in an ambulance, and we had to stop to pick up a number of other people and stop at a number of other hospitals in the Manchester area. It must have taken 4 hours. And I was in no fit. The ambulance turned up early. I was in no fit state to even walk to it. I had to be taken to it in a wheelchair, and I was taken out at the other end on a stretcher. And I just vomited profusely at the other end. I had to journey back and forth, I don't know, literally hundreds of times in the car. And when I was feeling fine, when the treatment was going okay, it would be no problem other than just the boredom of the repetitive journey. But a lot of the time I'd be feeling very sick, and I would be sick in the car. I'd always carry a supply of sick bowls, and I might vomit half a dozen times on the 1.5 hour journey there. And if I was going to receive chemo and then be coming away the same day, which they could do with certain stages, they would give me a Maxolon drug, which would try and stop me being sick, but would make me feel very drowsy. And that was a horrible sensation, because I was trying to hold back from being sick, and at the same time I felt semi-conscious. It was just hell. When I became very ill in the latter stages of the treatment, that my spirit broke, as it were, and that I was just ready to call it a day. I'd had enough. And literally, just a Tuesday afternoon, I went berserk and I just started kicking hell out of it. A dustbin thing, a trash can in the waiting area, and just screaming. And there was just nobody around, and it just burnt itself out after 10 minutes. And at this stage, I just felt like crying all the time. I had no control over it. And I really thought, this is it, you know, something's going to happen. I just felt like destroying things, or destroying myself. Even though I knew I was coming to the end and things could pick up, I just felt there was nothing there. There was nothing of me left. There was this cured body, but I was gone. And there didn't seem to be an escape route, and there didn't seem to be any way of venting what I felt. And that still continues.
Gary has now completed his course of chemotherapy. After a bone marrow transplant from his sister, he's taking drugs to prevent tissue rejection. But while he's improving physically, he relies on tranquilizers to help him cope with the emotional consequences of cancer.
I do feel very lonely. I feel very isolated. As if I am stuck in a prison cell. Not necessarily a physical, but it's a combination of my mental state, my physical state. I feel like I've surrounded myself with a wall so that I can exist, to make it easier for me, to make it easier on my family. Very few things give me genuine happiness, and very few things seem to genuinely penetrate the wall. I've got to confront whatever's behind it and come to terms with it if I'm going to start to live again. And I just don't know how to do that. That's where I feel I need help.
It's been established that a cancer patient who has some worries about their illness or treatment, but who doesn't have someone they can turn to who understands, is very much more likely to develop what we call a depressive illness, to become so miserable they can't snap out of it, and to develop problems like sleep disturbance, loss of interest, irritability, poor concentration. So in fact, it can have a profound knock-on effect. If patients can be helped to disclose their worries and concerns, doctors can then tailor their response to that so that the patient is getting optimal care. And I think it's certain if that happens, then that a lot of the kind of psychological difficulties and problems that currently exist will evaporate or certainly last for a much shorter time. And so at the end of the day, I think the quality of life of cancer patients and their families will be hugely improved.
In Lancaster, the Cancer Care Scheme offers this kind of help. Patients can get treatment locally because Lancaster has its own cancer physician and a team who offer advice, information and therapy to all who want it.
Good morning.
Ron Smith, who has lymphoma, goes to the Cancer Care Centre for massage therapy.
Yep.
These two have gone. They never really developed very
No.
Did they? They were only little ones.
You just thought they were damn carbuncles, but it's pain that was coming through.
Frightens you. It does. The old story that if you've got the big C, you're going to die tomorrow. Not next week, it's going to happen tomorrow. And I think it took me something like 4 or 5 weeks to really get it into my head that, you know, I wasn't going to die and I was going to beat cancer no matter what it was. From the start of having cancer, I'd never known what pain is. I'd never been ill before. Last time of my illness was Asian flu. That was in the 50s. Other than that, apart from an odd cold, it's about my limit of being ill. And this has really knocked spots off me for the simple reason is I've never known what pain is. Now I know what pain is. Terrible. And Liz gives me 2 days of freedom. It's as simple as that. Or cancer care, you know, I wouldn't have known it other than coming here. And I get 2 days of freedom. And that's superb.
I think the simple rules that would apply would be that we never tell a lie. We are always honest to patients about what we tell them. We always answer questions that they may raise to the best of our ability. We never remove a shred of hope. If there's a possibility of a patient doing well, then we encourage them to seek that opportunity. We talk openly and frankly.
Well, cancer care has meant the battle that people have between having cancer and going to die. Cancer care has been everything, really. It's a place where you can go, you can chat to other people in the same position, and they're still walking about. They're still living. You get a feeling that, not depression, I don't think that's the feeling. I think the feeling is that nobody wants you. And, you know, people are frightened to come near you because you've got the big C. It gives you all sorts of things. I never was one that imagined things or anything of that nature, but I was always worried. I couldn't wait for the next treatment to see if I was going to feel that little bit better each time. And I never did. I never felt better. It took 6 months before I started to feel as I was improving. And then it just happens. That next day is a good day.
The treatment of cancer it goes far beyond the management of cancer as a disease. And that if we're to provide a proper level of patient care, we must recognise and cope with the very severe emotional consequences of illness that so many of these patients suffer.
How are you doing?
Well, it was good news for that, wasn't it?
Yes, it's better than you'd expected in a way.
Oh, dear me, I thought I was going to be in for another good 2 or 3 weeks.
Very early on, we introduced into the system a health visitor. She began by sitting in with the clinics and coming on ward rounds and listening in to what was being said, observing the patient's treatments and so on.
It's a bit selfish, really.
Now, how's things at home? What about your wife?
You know what it's like. She has my bird to carry in her own as well.
Yes.
And you only just realise it, don't you?
Yes.
After... She doesn't say much, but you see she's been crying now and again. But
her most important role was to follow that up by visiting the patient when they went home. And in the informal atmosphere of the patient's home, often with the patient's family around them. She would go over the ground, she would cover it again, she would answer the questions that might have arisen after the patient had left the hospital.
We do a thing, like, you know.
The more we went into this, of course, the more we did realise just how big the problem was. We felt that we should provide patients and relatives with an opportunity to share their experiences with each other.
Worried about having your treatment anyway and anticipating.
And so we started up a monthly meeting whereby patients, ourselves, anyone with an interest in cancer would come along in the evening and in an informal setting would just have a natter with each other.
How did you get on with your treatment, Trish, yesterday?
Well, my blood count was too low, so I didn't have it.
And how do you feel about that?
Well, I was glad at the time. I felt like I had a reprieve. But thinking about it now, it just means that it's going to drag on even longer.
As we realised the need for dealing with the anxiety elements, so we introduced into the system various forms of therapy to cope with that.
Just allowing things to happen. That's good. That's good. I just feel the relaxation they so quickly put into your eyes. That's right.
Cancer Care provides Tricia with a hypnotherapist to help her relax before her next session of treatment.
Feeling of relaxation move up and over your forehead.
I first had it because I just couldn't face the chemotherapy anymore. It was getting really bad. I was ready to just give it in altogether. And I told Dr. McElmurray, who was really understanding, because I felt a bit silly saying it, that I was frightened of the needle and frightened of the drugs and so on. I felt, you know, like a frightened child or something. But he didn't make me feel stupid at all. He just was totally understanding and suggested I could perhaps try hypnotherapy, which might help.
This feeling of calmness, this feeling of relaxation is staying and remaining with you because you've decided that it's part of the process of your complete recovery. You know that when it's time for you to have your chemotherapy, you know you'll be feeling completely and utterly relaxed. And as you walk through the hospital, with every step that you take, you're finding yourself feeling really, really calm, really relaxed. And as you enter the ward and you're lying upon the bed, that feeling of calmness and relaxation is staying, it's remaining with you. The reason why it's staying and remaining with you is because you know that you're in control, that you're allowing this to take place. And as the doctor places the needle in your vein, in some strange way, this is helping you to go even deeper and deeper into relaxation.
Cancer Care also offers its services to the patients in the hospice where the scheme is based.
Cancer has a variety of very profound effects on patients, ranging from the denial and the anger, the misery, the fear and anxiety which people have of the illness and the way in which it will affect them, the pain that they might anticipate, the manner of their death, the inevitability of dying, the fact that for them they regard it as a death sentence. It's a real mixture of emotions. And emotions which aren't just felt by the patient. These have ripples through the whole family. We go some way to firstly recognise the problem, that's the first thing, a commitment by us to follow them through their illness, to help with the various stages of adjustment, to always be available during times of need, to keep them on the track, to encourage, to cajole, to help them accept, to maintain a positive approach where that is realistic.
In the light of the study by the Cancer Research Campaign, which shows that cancer patients need professional guidance and support, researchers believe Lancaster could be a model for the rest of the country to follow.
The service there embraces diagnosis, treatment and support, which can only be good for cancer patients and their families, in that one model. And they have a particular interest in communication. So that means they're actually listening to the needs of the patients.
Lancaster, I think, is admirable because in one district a major effort has been made to grapple with psychological aspects of care and with information giving on a large scale. And there they have tried, I think, to get some sense in the system by having a structure where patients do have an opportunity to get more information from a support network, from a specialist nurse, and from the doctors.
But those without access to these services have to face the challenge of cancer alone.
When you are faced, when most people are faced with something awful happening to them, that you just kind of get on with it and make the best of it. You can. I mean, either you can sink or you can get on and make the best of it. And that's what I tried to do. But I felt very devastated and I didn't know where to turn to. I didn't know who to talk to.
It's like the Vietnam veterans. I mean, everybody takes for granted now. Somebody goes off and fights a war, they're going to come back differently. People talk, my family are beginning to realise now, but people talk of, oh, you're looking your old self again, or you're behaving like your old self again. But it's not that at all. You change, you have remnants of your old self within you, but there's completely new unexplored areas. And it's those that I need to learn about. I think it's as vital as the medical treatment to cure the leukemia. I mean, they've cured my body. They need to help me with my mind, basically, now.
Well, since we made that film, Roy Wilcox, whom we saw in hospital with the health visitor, has died. But his family still wanted us to tell his story. The others are all doing well, and we've put Gary in touch with the support services in Lancaster. At the end of the programme, we'll be giving out the number of a telephone helpline. After the break, the story of one of Britain's newest citizens. Welcome back. 2 months ago, we showed a film called The Children of the Killing Fields. It was about Cambodians trapped in appalling conditions in camps on the Thai-Cambodian border. While there, we came across Sato Kung, a remarkable 14-year-old whose dream was to go to school in England. So we followed him as that dream came true for Sato A Child Apart.
Site 2, Thailand, the largest refugee camp in the world. 170,000 people crammed into 5 square miles. 9 years ago, the Cambodians fled their country and the genocide of the Khmer Rouge. Site 2, was supposed to be a staging post for these children of the killing fields, but it has become a permanent and dangerous home. Trapped on the Thai-Cambodian border, they are largely forgotten by the outside world. 14-year-old Sato Kung was born into war. As a baby, he survived the tyranny of Pol Pot, and at 12, he trekked through minefields and enemy lines to reach Site 2. He came alone, leaving his home and his parents, possibly forever. Now, taken in by a family, he faced fresh dangers on his arrival at the border. Nothing grows in Site 2. There is only the weekly rice ration. The Cambodians are trapped. They cannot work. There is no education. Few escape this prison. Hope is restricted to the remote chance of an exit visa to the West. This is Sato's ambition. His chances depend on an aid worker who has taken up his case, Alison Blair.
He's a child and he needs protecting. And I thought, having heard his story, that if anything happened to him, I'd feel responsible. And I also thought, you know, when you're surrounded by people who put a lot of emotional demands on you all day, every day in the camp, you can tend to just sort of switch off and think, I can't really help you, and if I help you, I've got to help 5 million other people. So the easy thing is to say to yourself, well, be sensible. You can't help them all, so hide behind not helping anyone. And I thought, I just want to fight for this child. What are his options at the moment? His educational possibilities are very, very limited. It's probable that he would be conscripted within a few years to fight perhaps against his own people in his own land. His land is occupied by communists. If he was my child, would I send him back, risk death to go back home? Ideally, he should have stayed happily with Mummy and Daddy and, you know, forever after in his homeland. That's ideal. But he's now here, so we've got to think really carefully what is the best for him for the future.
It's almost unprecedented for a child on his own to be granted an exit visa, but a year of persistent lobbying has finally paid off. Alison has good news. She has won Sato's release. He is the lucky one. There are 70,000 children in Site 2, and he alone is leaving for the West. His new home will be Britain. It could be years before Sato's parents learn of his move to Britain. There are no official lines of communication between Thailand and Cambodia, only the dangerous routes used by the smugglers.
Sramai ta chibet mang sra Anglais. Chưa ya mai.
Bài thì riêng van srua. Nên sợi phép chương nào thế này.
Sato arrives in Britain. He has no family, no friends. He speaks little English. His family don't know whether he's east or west, dead or alive. He's 6,000 miles from his home and his culture.
Sato is a Khmer, and if he goes to a third country, suddenly centuries of Khmerness will be cut and slowly but surely diluted in another culture. This is not all bad, because Khmer culture has produced some pretty horrendous things as well as some incredibly positive things. The Khmers look to the third country as the golden land. And yes, it's probably better than Cambodia under Pol Pot, but I feel it's really important for them to understand that it's not going to be a picnic when they get there. You know, there are long unemployment queues. There are parents of the unemployed who are looking at different colored people arrive and thinking, well, you are a threat to my child, you are a threat to my country. The foreigners who come and work on the border come because they appreciate people of a different color, of a different language, of a different culture. But there's a lot of people at home who hate them. And they're going to meet hostility and abuse and rejection. And that's something I can say, but he can't know till it's too late.
Now in Britain, Sato has been placed in the hands of the charity Save the Children. His new home is a mansion near Hampton Court. Built by the Earl of Halifax in 1757 to house his mistress, it's now home to 23 Vietnamese children.
Could you explain to Sato that we're very glad that he's come to England, and we're very happy to welcome him here to join us with the other children. We've got 23 children here who are all very excited and looking forward to meeting him.
That's
a bag to put his school books in.
That's the pole that I was
A photograph album, because you can put photos in it. It's very difficult at this stage to say what Sato's future is going to be over the next few years. I think one of the difficulties for the refugees when they first come to the UK is the freedom, and they simply can't get used to the idea that everything is open, and if they want to travel anywhere, they just go, they don't have to ask for passes. And he'll need quite a long time just to settle in and adjust and not have any pressures put on him at all. He'll go to school and very much take it at his own pace.
Good, right round that time. Keep it going, please, Jason. Yes, good. Good. Hang on, Sato. Now, Sato, come here. Daniel, can you come out with me? Because we're slowing things down. Sato, come here. Come here. You mustn't leave there. You mustn't run until I tell you, because you could have landed on top of him. All right, so you have to be very careful. Wait until I tell you. All right, back to the line. OK. Next one, please, Sam. Yes, fine, Chris. Still crouched down, Simon.
What about that?
This is a milk.
That's milk, good. And that?
The orange.
Orange juice,
Orange
good.
Juice.
Sato is now a pupil at the Rectory Comprehensive School in Hampton.
Good.
It's just 1 month since he arrived in Britain.
Cheese.
Oh, peas.
Peas.
Peas. OK.
Yeah.
What about those?
They are potatoes.
Good.
Yeah.
What can you make from potatoes?
Made chips.
That's right,
Yeah.
good. At Hampton Court House, do you eat English food or do they cook Vietnamese food?
Vietnamese food.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Do you like Vietnamese food?
Yeah, it's the same as Cambodian food.
Is it the same?
Yeah.
Mm. What about school dinners?
School
Do you like school dinners?
Yeah. I eat chips.
Just chips?
Yes, chips.
Sato's found it quite difficult to settle in. He does get unhappy sometimes. And of course, he's often very quiet because he can't really say the things that he wants to say. A lot of people talking in a strange language all the time. He's making friends with the children at school, though to begin with it was all quite overwhelming for him. He's living in a very westernised situation, and yet within himself he is still very Cambodian and brings all his memories of his early years with him and his life in the camp in Thailand.
Very difficult in the camp. We just stay in the small camp and in a small house. Got every day we difficult that they fighting every day near the camp. Sometimes they fight in the camp, and it's very dangerous. Sometimes some people was killed in the camp. Like everything here, can have a good school and study, a good teacher, good friend, and got a new house. We got food enough, and we can go anywhere.
Cambodian New Year, and Sato has come to celebrate with many of the 300 Cambodians who live in Britain.
Well, I think it's very difficult for all the refugee children to come and have to straddle the two cultures. He has to grow up knowing that he is Cambodian and that's something to be proud of. So we have to try and make him very proud of his own cultural traditions.
In some ways, he'll always be an orphan, even though we know he's got a mother and father in Cambodia. He'll always be isolated, but he's got incredible resources, this boy. He's got an inner strength and a sort of dignity that surprises me again and again, and I think is one of the things that drew me to him in the first place.
I miss my family very much. My father, when I lived from him, he said, "Give me to study hard." He wanted me to have my family.
Do you think you might like to go back to Cambodia one day?
Yeah, I think so. I want to see my father one day. When I have been in school, when I finish school, and when my country freedom is getting better, I want to see my father.
Sato is still learning to adjust. Inevitably, he misses his family and the friends that he had in the camp, and it's going to take him a long time to settle in. That's all for this month, except to say, referring back to our earlier film, that if you've had experience of cancer and you'd like to talk about it, or if you'd like to know about support in your area, you can phone our helpline on 0345 500 800. The calls are charged at local rates, and the lines are open until 1 a.m. and tomorrow from 9:30 until midday. Until next month, good night.